Statistically, how many birds per nest survive?
Survive to how long?
21 days then. 21 days.
21 days.
Like from
You're going to have about 60, 65, 70% will make it 21 days. 1 in 4 chicks are going to make it from time of hatch to the fall. So you're looking at only about 25% of all chicks that hatch make it to the fall.
the most hens nest twice, or
No,
just
we've seen as many as 3 nests in a single season,
right?
but that's not super common. About 20% of all hens that are alive April 15th and survive through the breeding season will have 2 successful clutches. So 1 in 5 hens. So they're highly, highly productive, and that's the key, is getting them to survive long enough to reproduce. So they have really high mortality rates or low survival. They offset that with high reproductive capacity. So early in the season, you can have 16 eggs on average, like this time of year, 16 eggs in a nest. And then by the end of the season, that average is down around 7 or 8. We've seen clutch sizes as large as 31 in a single nest. So they're highly, highly productive. I would like to add a little bit to the whole confusion of where all these kind of misnomers come from, is like, or the cause for these declines, right? As you've heard the cowbirds, and we've even documented sandhill cranes eating quail chicks. We know it happens. Do turkeys eat quail chicks? Sure, if they run across them, but they're not the cause for these declines. I think part of the confusion is there's so many different things that's happened. It's like the perfect storm, everything against quail that's caused this decline. Greg's absolutely right. It's the habitat ultimately, because it's a predation, it's a predator-prey dynamic. It's the predation, the reason why we don't have the quail. And all of these things have contributed to the population decline. It starts with habitat. If you don't have the habitat, you're not going to have the birds, right? But there's a lot of other things that's changed too, if you think about it, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 years ago compared to now. Things like the hawks used to not be protected. You can read in Stoddard's book where he mentions 3 times in there he shot Cooper's hawks. Now they're protected. You can't do that. It's illegal for you to do that. You'll get a hefty fine if you do that, right? The fur trade used to be pretty popular, and lots of predators were removed just as a part of livelihood. People made a living off of trapping and killing these meso mammals, coons, bobcats. A lot of these were killed and the pelts were sold, so they made a livelihood off of this. What's the fur trade today? Is it still here? It is, but it's almost non-existent. And so all of these things stacked up, in addition to losing this habitat, that's what's happened to the quail. So it's hard to point at one thing. You're talking about the fire ants. We see actually a pretty high loss in some years with fire ants. On average, we lose 3% of our nests to fire ants. On average. That's pretty inconsequential, right? Not many. 3 out of 100 nests, that's not that big a deal. But in certain years, when it gets really, really dry, you'll lose as much as 15 to 16% of your nests to fire ants. Why is that? Because fire ants are seeking out moisture when it gets dry. What has moisture? Eggs. So they're typically getting when they're pipping out. And so they will get really aggressive that time and depredate more of those nests. So it's kind of this revolving door of all these different factors that's accumulated to cause the population decline.
Is there that much difference between the turkey habitat and the quail?
There's a little bit of difference, but it's pretty good overlap.
But I mean, our turkey population is fantastic.
Right. And so there's a lot of predators of quail that aren't predators of turkeys. And so a lot of it comes back to the life history strategy. So we were talking to my truck. Who can tell me what the life expectancy of a quail is?
18 months.
6 to 7 months, really. And that 8 months, what that's going on is the life expectancy of an adult quail, right? And so only about 20% of your birds that are alive, adult birds, will survive to that next year. So I have a phrase in my lab that I say a lot of: 1-year-old quail has been dead for quite some time. If you factor in chick survival, 1 in 4 make it to the fall, so 25%, multiply that times the the 20%, now you're way down there in terms of life expectancy. So it's really about 6 to 7 months. So the odds are stacked against them. Right. Turkeys, on the other hand, is about 3 times that long. And it's, the big reason for that is that when they get out of once they hatch, they're bigger. They grow faster, and they're outgrowing a lot of those predators out there. Right. And so quail chicks live a lot longer, and they have a lot more predators that's after them. One thing I always say, I wouldn't want to come back in a second life as a quail bird.
You're right.
Depends on who's
Everything.
shooting them.
What's that?
Depends on who's shooting them.
That's right. That's right.
You say that a hen may raise 2 clutches, 2 sets of chicks in a single season, right?
Absolutely. Pretty
So,
common.
so my question is, how old does that
Double play.
chick become independent and able to find its own food?
Yeah, so, you know, they're what we call precocial. So the second that they leave the nest, they're able to feed on their own. But they have to learn from the adult where to feed and how to avoid predation while they're feeding. And so what we've seen is broods will be dumped as early as 6 or 7 days, but more commonly the hens or the cockbirds, both of them raise them, they'll hold them for about 3 weeks of age. It depends also on the time of the year. Early in the year, they tend to hold those broods for longer. Later in the season, or about mid-season, they'll drop them quicker. And then later in the season, they'll hold them for longer again. It all has to do with the opportunity that they have to go and re-nest. And so, but what you see, I guess probably the more important question to ask related to that is, when can they become thermoregulatory efficient? And that's at about 35 to 45 days of age. So when they hatch, they have feathers, but they're incapable of thermoregulating on their own. And so they have to put on a lot of feathers, and they rely heavily on the adult for provisioning during that time to keep them warm. And that's where we're talking about these cover conditions, where it's really important to have the right cover so they can get under these palmettos or the scrub shrub in order to be protected from rainfall events. If they get wet, and it's even just a change in 5 or 6 degrees, can really hurt these chicks. And so 35 to 40 days is when they become independent and able to thermoregulate on their own. And so that's what we got to do, is get them to survive that long. And what we see is about that time period is when their survival starts to go way up, at right around 7 to 8 weeks of age. We're losing 3 to 5% of our chicks every day up to that point. So 3 to 5 out of 100 chicks we're losing every single day until they get to about 35 to 45 days. You do the math there, it's hard to kind of ask, how do we have any quail at all? Because they're highly productive, right? And that's why the habitat management is so important, to get it right.